It's time to let you in on a little secret. Actually, lots of secrets. We're talking strategy and, most importantly, return on your investment for your podcast. Welcome to Branded Podcast Secrets. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Branded Podcast Secrets. I'm your host, Erin Greger, here today with another very special guest. I am with, and I need to take a breath so I can say this correctly because it's such a beautiful name and I don't want to mess it up, but Karolina Toth. How did I do?
That's
all right.
Yeah, I am Karolina.
Oh, the way you say it. I'm just so vanilla when I say it. I don't like it. But Karolina, welcome so much for being here. I really appreciate it. So Karolina is an internal coach and the podcast host of the Level Up Engineering podcast. She works for Coding Sans, which is a software development agency. And her podcast, I'm going to read it straight from the description. It's a podcast that reveals actionable management secrets from some of today's most successful tech leaders. It's a podcast that brings you key insights from fellow engineering managers, tech leaders that help level up your management skills and take your developer team to the next level. So I can't wait to dig into this because you're technical, which I know a lot of people on the technical side are going to shy away from, right, on the podcasting. And I'd love just to start out for you to tell a little bit about the history of your podcast. So, your company, Coding Sans, you guys are getting together, talking about content management, and kind of walk me through that moment where the podcast came up as an idea.
All right. You need to know, first of all, thank you for having me here, and thank you for the invite. As I said, I'm really honored to be on your show. You need to know a bit of a background about me because I wasn't hired for being a podcast host. In my previous role at another tech company, I was heading up marketing and HR efforts, and I was spread quite thin to be doing all that stuff by myself. I was doing content marketing and I was doing all kinds of HR things, and so I went over to Coding Sense to be more of community organizer and to help the company grow and to help organize itself, to be more acquainted with the Agile ceremonies and just to be the person that really cares about the improvement and development of the people. They already had the content marketing team and they were doing really amazing things. And I had the distinct pleasure and luck to be able to just, spit out ideas and have someone listen to me and say, oh, that's interesting. So I kind of just went there and said, why don't you guys do a podcast? It's like the next big thing. And they had already done market search where they found that what development leaders are interested in is to hear how others are doing. Because, in the industry, it's not always all like being friendly and sharing, like how is your leadership team doing, or what are your top choices for finding out who is going to be your next manager. But they are interested in this stuff. So they were doing interviews already, but they weren't recording them. They were just doing blog posts. So, I had my own radio show when I was younger here in Hungary, and then I was a production intern when I was in college. So I was always kind of into entertainment and like audio entertainment, but I never made the leap of becoming a talk show host. So I said, I would be entirely too happy to be the host of the podcast if we ever did it. And it actually only took a few months for the existing marketing team to kind of jump on my train and say, all right, we shall try it out and see how this goes. So it wasn't all strategic in the sense of, like coming up with the business case before we came up with the solution as the podcast. It was more like, I thought it was a great idea. We saw that there wasn't really anybody in the area doing something like this. And Coding Sense is really great about education. We have a really good intern program. We do internal workshops for our developers. So knowledge sharing is really something that we enjoy doing, and we think it's important for us to put like Budapest on the technology map. It's there already, but with the podcast we get a lot more traction. So this is how it all started, and I am just entirely too lucky to be involved with the marketing team who will like make it happen with me.
I love it. You got to love a company that listens and supports ideas. So I think it's awesome. So I want to walk through the content strategy, though. You touched on it a little bit when you were talking about, that desire to share content and, be that thought leader in your industry. So if I were to look at what you guys do versus what the podcast talks about, it almost seems like there's a conflict of interest, right? You are a development shop. You're helping companies develop, yet you're teaching companies how to lead a development team. It's almost like you're empowering the people that you'd want to hire you and teaching them, how to do that. So I know I have an idea of your reasoning, but can you describe or, go more in depth about why you wanted to take the show down that path, and how it probably has helped you tremendously, though, in getting clients, even though you're, empowering people to lead development teams.
Right. So, first of all, I think we can all agree, and I've listened to a couple episodes of your show, so I know you will agree that the most important thing is to provide value. So if you are just kind of trying to sell your services, you're probably not gonna hit much traction, because that is really old strategy. And we also believe in the sense that we aren't always the right choice for every company. So we like to work with people who will come to us and give us the project, or will need a couple developers or a team extending their team. And we don't really want to push ourselves onto a project where we don't see ourselves fit, or where somebody needs different things. So us providing really great tips from other engineering leaders, I think kind of helps people understand more of our values for continuous growth and maybe even continuous exploration of ideas. So we like to think of ourselves as a really fast company, like always trying out new technologies and seeing what's out there and figuring out what the new solutions might offer to some of the old problems that our clients have. And with knowledge sharing, it's the same. Like, we are not stingy with what we have seen being successful and not working. And with that said, my guests are also, thank you to all my guests. My guests are also very open to share their personal stories of growth and how they have become some of them are really great thought leaders who are known in the industry, and their struggles and what they have done to become who they are.
Yeah, I saw some of your guests. You've got some incredible, you've had some incredible people on there. How do you select your guests? I think that's a thing a lot of people struggle with. And is there, obviously you're getting some great names. What's the strategy behind determining who you're going to have and then, reaching out to bring them on?
Right. Basically, we looked at who we work with. So there is obviously a business case behind this whole thing. So usually we work with technology decision makers, right? So they are the ones who will interact with our teams, or they are the ones who will interact with our project managers. And so these are the people to whom we want to provide content and with whom we want to help with the value that we give. So they are interested in learning about other technology leaders' strategies and methods of leading their own teams. And so first we thought, okay, we will invite all of these really great people who lead engineering teams and see what they have to say. So we started with these themes of how do you create a great team? How do you manage remote engineers? How do you create a career ladder? And with that said, I don't know if you know this, but we just started the spin-off because we got some really good feedback, and some of our listeners were interested in exact stories of like how big companies made it to the point where they are now. And so we just started a new kind of spin-off of the Level Up Engineering podcast called Level Up Engineering Stories, where we will focus on the products that they have made. So we will not talk so much about a specific topic of, like giving feedback or performance reviews or anything like that. We will talk about, how is the engineering life at Slack? And I was lucky to interview Michael Lopp, or Renz, as you might know him off the internet, as the first guest for Stories.
Wow.
And he was talking about his experience at Slack, and he was the first VP of engineering at Slack. So he had an incredible point of view about how to grow a tech team from, like a really enthusiastic couple dozen engineers to 300 engineers. So first it started with us knowing who our consulting partners are, or who our clients are, and then receiving feedback, we decided to like make this spin-off into a whole new thing, and that's what we are starting right now.
I love it. So I love the ideas. I love the spin-off. I always say podcasts are definitely like that, where you get an idea and then you're like, now I want to start this one and this one. So there obviously has to be a business case for this, especially since the company would now make a second one, which is really exciting. So how do you all measure this? And I mean, I would have to say there's value in and of itself of getting, a hold of people at the top of Slack, et cetera. I mean, just that alone is amazing. But are you all measuring it? And you can give me the answer of no, because I know some companies don't, and that's totally cool. But are you measuring it, and how are you measuring it exactly to be able to say, yeah, it's going to be worth it for us to make a second one?
Yeah, it's the same team who is making the second one. So it's not like an entirely huge effort, because we are not making it parallel. We are kind of making it as we go. And if we can have a new guest who is from a great company and wants to talk about the company specifically and is able to talk about the company specifically, then we will make it into a stories episode. Otherwise, it's a Level Up Engineering podcast episode, and we talk about leadership tricks and tips. But we do use Captivate to look at our downloads and to look at our unique listeners. And we are on all of the podcasting platforms that, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on. And so we look at those numbers, and of course, those numbers are leading numbers. They are not, like the number of leads that we generate throughout the podcast. And I am lucky to say that we are not like making the podcast's life dependent on the number of leads that we generate. But it's, I think, definitely been easier for our sales to reach out to people and to talk to people, knowing that there is something that they might even know already about Coding Sense.
Yeah, it's that ability, we're talking with a customer right now, and just that ability for people to get to know the team they're hiring, right? I mean, you aren't the only dev shop in the world. And, for people to say, well, I'm picking between these three and I can get to know these people a little bit better, just even audio versus written. Do the sales team, does anyone from the sales team talk about, they mentioned the podcast, or even you had mentioned on this new podcast that people suggested, hey, can we have these stories? Are you getting feedback from listeners, whether it's potential customers or even, current customers, et cetera, like where it's that true feedback that you're actually getting?
I have gotten, this was really awesome. I have gotten the feedback that we went out and when we started, saying that we are Coding Sense, a potential customer was like, I heard about your podcast. It's really awesome, So that was like really good when it came back to me, and it was really, warming my heart. which sounds all too like romantic when we talk about business, but it was a really great feeling. And I am so lucky. Like I am, of course, like present on all the social media platforms as Fancy Karolina, like, share, subscribe, guys and gals. But I'm just kidding. But I do get some really incredible, just a couple of lines every now and then. Like somebody reached out to me and said something along the lines of, "This is one of my favorite podcasts, along like Tim Ferriss's podcast and some other things." And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, like what an honor to be even mentioned among these people. And then someone said, like, thank you for providing a little bit of inspiration while we are quarantining, because, like a lot of our past year and a half has been in quarantine. And that made me like incredibly touched, because I love doing the podcast, and that it's actually bringing people that kind of an inspiration. That's really awesome.
No, it is. Like before we hit record, I was telling you, sometimes you feel you're excited, you love doing it, but sometimes it can really feel like a black hole, right? Like you're talking and you can see the numbers, people are listening, or they're at least downloading, but to get that feedback, it really does. It can mean the world. And just when you're like, you kind of get it in your head that just your mom and maybe your family, a couple family members are listening, right? But to know that it's going beyond that, it really makes it special. Can you talk about video too? Because you guys do a video component to it versus just audio. Can you talk about the reasons behind that, and what you feel video has been able to offer outside of just an audio podcast?
Yes, and I do have to talk about me again for a little bit, but I had like I am promoting the podcast all the time, because I'm like, this is like so cool, and I think my guests are really awesome. So somebody tells me, like they are struggling with something, and I'm like, you know what? I actually just recorded an episode exactly about this. You should give it a listen. And I have gotten from some of my friends the feedback that, like, sorry, I only do video content. Like, I can't just sit still and listen to someone, and, like my mind wanders. And I'm like, the point of podcast is to be able to listen to something valuable while you are commuting to work. But of course, like, we stopped commuting to work for a while. And I have been, like really intrigued by video content, because that's like where the world is going. And so these two like data points made me think, like, why don't we do a video? And when I pitched the idea to the marketing team, they were obviously like maybe a little bit annoyed by like, okay, Karolina is like coming up with something new again. Like, we just settled in like having this podcast. We are not going to do a video. It's like too much work and we don't want to do it. And then perhaps I can call myself a little assertive when it comes to things that I think are good ideas, And so we kind of decided like how this is going to go, and just to give it a pilot shot, we decided, let's do 6 episodes of video and see how it does, and see whether or not we see any kind of difference. We are not currently promoting any of our video content anywhere, but we are putting it out there, and the number of our subscribers has definitely increased since we do video content. So that's been the positive sign that we were looking for. And some of our guests are really appreciative of having the video content as well, because they like it better as well. So for now, we decided to keep it just as another source of information for people who might prefer it over only audio.
Yeah, I love it. I think video, I always say COVID changed everything for video. Video was kind of a nice to have pre-COVID, right? Pre-quarantine. Now, it's not that you have to have it, but it's definitely more popular. We saw a huge increase in that. What other strategies changed for you? Like, you're 45 episodes in. We started it with the intention of doing this. We did it this way. obviously videos evolved. Anything else that's changed in how you create it or even how you promote the podcast?
I think one of the first things that changed when we started seeing some good numbers in listening was that we started inviting bigger names to the show. Like we kind of got braver in the sense that okay, so now people are actually interested. We should put ourselves out there and try to bring them some people who they really want to listen to. So that's another thing. Like some people reached out to me and said, like, I think you should have this person or that person. I would be really interested to hear about their story. And some of those people actually came on the show, and that was really awesome. What else? For me, one thing that's definitely changed, I think my first guest at home, like the first time you brought your microphone and your light and everything home. Then we didn't do video, so that I didn't bring the lights home, but since then I have lights. Then I first took the microphone home and I recorded the first episode at home. That was like kind of strange and cathartic at the same time, because it was like, I don't know if you know him, but Uncle Bob, who is like a huge name in IT. He is known for clean code and promoting it throughout his life.
Okay.
And like I've known him since I started working in IT, which was like 7 years ago. So I was like, oh my God, Uncle Bob is in my living room.
That's
like,
awesome.
Can you believe this? So that was the first time I said, do you mind if we take a selfie? And so ever since then, I take a selfie with every one of my guests. And like some of the people who follow me on social media are like, this is awesome. Like we get to see behind the scenes. And sometimes, they see who the next guest is going to be a couple weeks beforehand. So it kind of creates a little bit of excitement for all of us.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great idea. And I've done a lot so I'm at my home office right now too. I'll tell you the secret of the home recording. I don't know what you all have going on in your house, but I always have the mute button. When the guest is talking, I'm always on mute just because I've got dogs, I've got kids. You never know what's about to happen in my house. So that's always been the key for me. I want to dig in, though, on the bigger guests, because it's terrifying, right? To reach out to some of these names. And I know the worst you can hear is no, blah, 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 but it's still terrifying. And it's not like you can just... Sometimes you can, but reaching them can be a little more difficult. It's not like you can just pick up the phone and, give them a call or shoot a direct email. So has there been something that you found has worked really well in how you approach some of these big name people and getting them to come on?
I want to say that there is like a really elaborate strategy behind it, but there is not. I'm serious. It's like our head of marketing writes an email with his hands. It's not like, somebody's assistant or anything like that. He's the one who does the outreach. We talk about who the guests might be or who might be good fits for the podcast. And he is the one who writes the outreach email. And it's just a really honest email, like we are Coding Sense. We do this podcast. We think you would be awesome as a guest. So if you have the time and energy, we would love to have you. And then some people will say, like, I'm not going to come to your podcast. And we say, okay, that's fine. And some people are like, that's awesome. Let's do it. And we find the topic and we find the time.
Simple as asking. I love it though, because a lot of people, they won't even ask. Like do you ever get intros, or are you just like looking up an email and just emailing directly? Is that how you're...
Yeah, we look for the email addresses or some kind of a connection, and then we reach out to them. Some of my guests have been kind enough to offer to put me in touch with some of their friends.
Ooh, great.
Which has been incredible. But that's basically it.
Yeah, that's a great tip though too. I don't think, and I don't do it enough, to be honest with you, is asking your current guests like, hey, do you have anybody who would also be a good guest? Or, I mean, just, again, simple things. It's not rocket science or, anything that costs a lot of money. It's just about asking though. Any other tips or tricks you have in creating this podcast? Because I'm going to bet there's people listening and, you know, even trying to sell the podcast to their company that they're working for and being able to. Any tips or tricks you have for those people who are, you know, trying to put that right sales pitch together to their C-suite team and being able to sell the podcast idea to them, and to your point of persistence, that persistence that really paid off in several ways for you on this.
Right. I think it really helps if you work for like really agile, open-minded companies. And I'm lucky that Coding Sense is one of those companies. So we are always open to new ideas. Our entire culture is based around the company itself. So we have open spaces and all hands meetings. And so we really make a point of welcoming every single employee into creating the company itself. And so I am lucky to be in such a company where if you have good ideas, they are listened to. With that said, sometimes I can feel that I am a bit outside of people's comfort zones because I really live by, you know, the thinking, you know, like the worst thing you can do is not try, because then you're definitely not going to succeed. And so sometimes I have to be persistent, and I think I only give my name to things that I can truly be enthusiastic about. So I'm not going to pursue things that I don't really believe are good ideas. And the podcast was, in my head, was like definitely a win. No matter what we do with it, the worst thing we can do is not try it. And so it took a few months to like get everybody on the same page, but it's been 2 years, and I think we can definitely say that it's been a success for the company, the marketing team. I love doing it. So I'm really glad we did it. And I think I can speak for our team and say we are all happy that we did it.
Well, I love it. It's a great story. You know, and it goes to show, I think this is one of the most important perspectives. You don't have to have massive numbers for the podcast to have a big impact on your business. And, you know, you're getting clients from it. You're getting to be that top of mind. And then you're getting to be top of mind too in other companies that could be huge connections for you. So I love it. So if somebody wanted to go find the Level Up Engineering podcast, where would be the best place for them to go?
Definitely go to our website, codingsense.com, because if you subscribe to our newsletter, you will get the new episodes 2 weeks prior to everybody else getting them.
That's a great tip.
We do an early release to our subscribers, which has been a big hit, and people really like it. So go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter. And since we don't really promote YouTube, you should subscribe to our YouTube channel, because then you will see all the living rooms that I have attended recording with my guests.
I love it. How are you doing that private? Are you hosting it privately and then you open it up 2 weeks later? That's a great tip. That's a really great tip. Yeah. Okay. So all of that too is going to be on our notes page over at eringreger.com. So Karolina, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. I love the story. I love the persistence. Never apologize for being persistent. I definitely, or believing in something and pushing your way for that. So thank you so much again for being here. And I wish you all the continued success.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the invite.
Absolutely.